Hey everybody, this is Matt. I'm one of the co-founders of Universal. I'm here today with Zach, who just found out last week that he passed all four sections of the CPA exam, so he's officially done. So we're going to ask him a few questions so that you can walk away learning some new tips and advice and see what worked for Zach. So the first thing I want to ask you, Zach, is why did you get the CPA exam? Or why did you get the CPA license?
Well, I guess to start with, I took a couple accounting classes in high school and, just to fill my schedule, whatever. And I ended up liking them a lot more than I thought I did. So I kind of just kept pursuing it and just decided to pursue accounting ultimately at the University of Pittsburgh, where I graduated in December. So I just knew that it was, I guess, the penultimate licensure and, the field that I want to go to. And I know that at least with most companies, you can't get past a certain position without being a licensed CPA. So I just decided, there's nothing really telling me to not do this. So I might as well just go and do it, which I know it sounds kind of passive, but
that's the reality though, is
yeah,
in a weird way, having a college degree in, bachelor's of science in accountancy, it really doesn't matter because you're right. After you get past the third or fourth year into some of those more managerial positions, they're going to look to somebody that has the license. And it's great that it's sort of, it was a default, like I should do this right away, because what we've also seen is it gets harder with a job, with families. You know how much you studied. Imagine trying to fit in just life on top of all that.
I couldn't imagine that. No.
It's good that you did it, and you'll have this license, to carry around with you forever, regardless of whether your employer requires it or not. It's kind of viewed as being one of those top tier designations. So it's good that you went after it and it just knocked it out.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I can imagine doing that with kids or anything else like that.
I myself didn't do it either, but I work with a lot of candidates that do, and it's tough to find the time. So give us a little bit of a brief overview of your study schedule and sort of how your study in terms of how many weeks or months, and then kind of on a daily basis, weekly basis, what your schedule looked like.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in December, but I kept living out there up until my girlfriend graduated. I lived with her, and she graduated in May, so I moved out in early May. So I just really stuck my head down, just studied from January to May, and I got most of the studies done. But I remember I applied to take FAR on January 19th. I took it on March 3rd. Then I took audit on March 28th. So that is, I don't know. It really, I'm not too sure on the timeline for FAR because I did have a free Becker subscription last summer. So I just went through FAR then. So I guess I've been studying that for a while. But as for audit, that took me about 3.5 weeks. Regulation, I took on May 16th. So just over a month and a half. And then BEC, I took June 24th, and maybe a month and a week for that. So, but on the everyday, really, there wasn't really, I wasn't working at the time. I already graduated, so I wasn't really taking any classes. I was taking a couple online ones at the community college, but those weren't taking up a ton of my time. So I don't know, wake up at 8 or 9, study for 4 or 5 hours, go do my own thing for a while, then study another hour or two at night. So I know it sounds like a lot of time, but really when you kind of have the whole day to yourself, it's I just really can work it how I want. But I would say at least maybe total 4 or 5 hours average a day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
20 hours
a week. It sounds like that was sort of the first thing you did in the morning when your brain's the freshest. Knocked out a lot of the initial learning, a lot of the hard problems. And then it sounds like, was it the afternoon, evening, sort of a review of maybe what you learned earlier that day and earlier that week?
Yeah, one thing that I tried to integrate was spaced repetition. I wanted to, I guess, catch myself when I'm not thinking about or looking at CPA materials. Like if I'm watching TV or whatever, and I realize I haven't studied for a while, maybe I'll pull up a few flashcards or read a few pages from my notes or something like that, because I know I'm not paying attention. So if I ask myself questions when I know I'm not paying attention, that's a good indicator of how prepared you should feel.
Right.
If
Yeah,
you're not
exactly.
thinking
I
about
mean,
it,
so much of this material is hitting it multiple times, but then if you can get to that point too, where you're kind of asking yourself questions about it, like that's a different thought process and way to process information to the point
definitely.
where you probably feel like you could, maybe you explained it to your girlfriend or your family, or I don't know, but that's a
Yeah,
good method
that's a
to
good idea.
apply, to get past that initial just sort of
Definitely is.
remembering. So what
I hear that.
like what different resources did you use in
So
terms of
I
study
used,
courses?
so I used Becker, Roger, and Universal. I used Becker for going through the main lecture parts. I used Universal for when I wasn't super sure about something, or if I had some downtime, like I was doing laundry or something like that, and I wanted to keep my brain fresh, I would use your videos because
Yep.
I don't like sitting around for tons of time. So having short visual videos, those were a lifesaver. But then after I was finished the main content and the lectures, I would use mostly Rogers text bank
Yep.
for the quizzing and whatnot, because I find with all due respect to Becker, I find when I do the customized tests, they very often repeat the same questions. Like I could have 3 10-question sets in a row, and the first could have 2, the third could have the same 2. So it's like I'm not learning anything this way. So until I kind of ran out of all the available questions in that bank, because they tell you if you try them, if all
Yep.
the ones you've got incorrect. So I just went through those, and I found those to be really helpful because most of them I haven't seen in Becker.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed
Yeah.
Rogers Test Bank.
Yeah, I think the important thing, the important takeaway I hear from that is it's good to use more than one resource. I think there's this, that you have one of the big review courses and that's all you need. And I think the reality is content is very subjective. It's obviously the questions are objective and that there's a right or wrong answer, but the path of explaining and understanding this material can often be viewed differently across different platforms, right? So sometimes a topic of one course will make no sense, and then you see it in another course and it'll make perfect sense. And I think that's the message I'm always trying to reiterate is that with the amount of resources out there, it's better to use more than one to pass the first time than sort of hanging back and feeling, well, I don't really understand this, but let me go take it. And we all know those retake fees are out the roof,
I'm glad I did not need to.
Yeah, so it's good to hear that you used multiple resources, and like I said, all of them have different methods. They're all great in their own way. But so that's something I would encourage candidates to take a look
at.
So your first exam, right? It sounds like you studied for far over a longer period, but can you talk about, were there any changes to your study approach or strategy for those other 3 that you wish you would have employed from the beginning?
Yeah. Well, I know as for FAR, kind of reg and BEC, I know that they're very calculation oriented,
right?
Whereas audit, like we were talking about before we started recording, like it's not my strong suit. It's definitely my least favorite out of the 4. So I knew that I definitely had to be more vigilant when I was taking that, especially in the way that I'm a numbers hands-on person. I like working stuff out on scratch paper, but when it comes to audit, you don't do that. It's 90% conceptual, and that's just not how I learn. Like I said, I'm hands-on. Like I can't just read or listen to someone say like a certain concept. It'll take me much more longer, I guess just much longer to actually drill it down in my head, since I'm not able to work it out on paper. So luckily for FAR, I didn't really have to do that, but definitely when it came to audit, I certainly had to adjust for that because it's not the way that I learned. But luckily,
you're right. FAR, you have the journal entries to fall back on. Reg, very heavy calculation, a lot of rules and steps to follow. BEC, aside from IT and a little bit of economics, right? It's also calculation heavy. But audit is one, and from our perspective, it's really hard to teach because it is so subjective. You're talking about 1 or 2 words in a phrase that can change the outcome, right? And the reality is every audit team and every audit partner uses professional judgment. So who's to say that there's only one way, right? It's up to the auditor. So what we always try to say when it comes to audit is, can you put yourselves in the shoe of an auditor, right? And explain to your client, explain to the audit partner, why you're doing this particular test, because otherwise, if you're too focused on sort of memorizing, what the assertions are, what these procedures are,
Yeah.
the exam is really, really good at understanding who is memorized versus who is understood. And
Oh, for sure.
the questions will trip you up. And we see it time and time again that students will pass the other three, in the first or second times, and then audit, because it is so different, they fail 3 or 4 times. And I think it's just a mindset thing sometimes that you have to bring. So it's good that you at least recognize that and
Thank you.
were able to adapt as you went through. So
yeah, it was definitely my least favorite.
Awesome. Yeah. On a lighter note, as soon as you finished and walked out of the Prometric centers, is there any sort of ritual that you had? I mean, for me, it was going straight home, having a few drinks, having a nice dinner.
Yeah. So for going, I would always get an energy drink. I'd get to the Prometric. For each exam I took it. I know like for your appointments, technically, like that's when your exams start, but I've learned that you could take it before then. So okay. I've taken all my exams up to half an hour before my appointment time. And I would still give myself half hour, 40 minutes. So just sit in the parking lot, I would get like a Bang or a Rain or something. And I would get my binder of notes, and I would just start drinking it and just start reading out loud to myself what I've included in my notes. Yeah. But as for afterwards, it was just Chick-fil-A.
It's funny how often I hear that.
Yeah.
I myself am a big fan. I guess you never took any exams on Sundays, but
no, I did not, luckily.
I think you have to have something, right? It's because what happens, right? And if you have taken an exam, you would know this, right? For the people listening, is that it's like a mind warp. You walk out, and you're like, what the heck just happened? You want to think about everything, go check your notes, the textbook. And the reality is you just need to decompress. And so if you have something that you go do, I agree, as a routine, that's a great way to do it. But I really liked what you said about getting there early, because so often, right, I hear of people like they roll up and they just need a few minutes to take a deep breath and before they go in, and use that time to study a little bit, rehash some key thoughts, but certainly don't be late, because you don't need that extra stress.
Don't. Nope.
Awesome.
Say goodbye to those fees.
So what's up next in your career? Now that you have the license, what will you be starting a job soon? Where do you see yourself maybe later on?
Yeah, so I began working at Deloitte on August 8th as a tax consultant, and I forget the very specific name for it, but in an international tax group. Okay. We're working out of their Philadelphia office. And again, like I was telling you a bit ago, luckily the first couple of days are in Manhattan, so I'm really pumped for that. But really, just then, I'm so looking forward to it. But up until then, just going to the Outer Banks for a week, and then after that, still working part-time a little bit, but not too much. But then after that, just really winding down, getting myself prepared, cleaned, whatever, set up, ready to enter the corporate world.
The good news is that I believe the Big Four all offer a passing bonus if you pass within the first year. So you have that to look forward to. And I think the other thing you have to look forward to is you won't have to deal with the CPA exam anymore. So your mornings, your weekends, your afternoons, those will all free up. What are some of the hobbies? What are some of your hobbies that you like to do?
I've been on a real reading kick lately. Nice. I was really into Stephen King books a couple summers ago, but with school and then studying, I just didn't have, the mental fortitude to want to read outside of those. So I picked that up lately. Just playing video games. I enjoy going to the gym.
Awesome.
Enjoy reading the Wall Street Journal. So things like that.
Yeah, I think, one thing too is those hobbies. Did you do those during the studying? Because I think there's this belief that there's no other time for anything else, and I'm a big believer of still making time for your hobbies and personal enjoyment.
So I definitely went to the gym. I thought that was really necessary. If I just swamp myself with just studying every day, if I didn't have at least one other thing to do, changing my routine a little bit, then I'd
Mhm.
probably go crazy. So I definitely did that. But as for reading, I didn't, just because I would just be too burned out after,
I get that too. I've
doing the same
never,
thing every day.
yeah,
I wouldn't be able to.
I've always been a hard one to read after working. But yeah, I mean, the four
Yeah.
things I always say, to keep in mind throughout the exam
Mhm.
is, healthy eating, hydration,
Definitely.
exercising, and then just personal enjoyment, spending time with your friends and family. I mean, that can go a long way. So even if
For
it's
sure.
just on the weekends, keep that in mind. But
Mhm. I
yeah,
agree.
Zach, thanks for
Definitely.
talking. Hopefully
Oh,
everybody
of
found
course.
your experience, your advice, tips helpful, and
Good luck,
best of luck in
everyone.
your career. And now you don't have to look back, and deal with this anymore.
Nope.
So you have a lot more time on your hands. So
All
good luck.
done. Oh yeah. Can't wait.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Of course.